My name's Michael Flavin and I'm Head of Curriculum Innovation here at King's. My role here is closely tied up with a college-wide initiative called the King's Experience Project. The project itself is the outcome of research. A few years ago, the King's, along with the University of Warwick, undertook a major piece of evidence-based research looking at universities where the curriculum had undergone a whole-scale and particularly a strategic level change. To give you some indication of the scope of the research, these were the universities that were studied. So as you can see, this was worldwide in its scope. And in each case, it was to understand what had been the underpinning rationale, the underpinning circumstances that had driven an institution to undertake a whole-scale review of its curriculum, and also to consider what processes had been undertaken in order to put the curriculum review into practice, and also then to consider what were the outputs, what had come from all that research. Then to bring it into an institutional context, I mean this was lengthy research and worldwide research. We did then want to consider what that meant for King's. And we can see two questions on the board there about what does a King's graduate look like, trying to conceptualize what we wanted people who'd undertaken their study at King's to be like at the end of that process. And along with that, thinking, well, what should we be teaching? And how should we be learning and teaching in order to get there? So in a way, there's two questions here, but there's an underpinning broader question for any university to consider is what makes it distinctive? It's increasingly a global landscape for universities. And more, each university has to think about, well, what makes them? What's distinctive about that particular institution? Going back to the research, this was its final distillation into its smallest component parts, if you like. And that was when we'd taken a look at over 25 worldwide universities that had made the decision to go for strategic level curriculum change. Here's what we came out with in the sense of the curriculum characteristics. This is what we found quality curricula had in them, that students would have the opportunities to benefit from being in a research-rich environment. They'd have the opportunity to undertake interdisciplinary study and the opportunity to engage both with global and local communities and the opportunity to acquire enhanced level academic literacies. The key for us at King's then, whereas we can take this as pretty much an output of global research, is each of these terms is potentially contestable and may not mean the same thing to the same people. So part of our work here over the last year or so has been to critically interrogate what we mean by these key terms and then think in terms of what can we do with them in learning and teaching terms. We'll take one just to see, we'll look at all of them, but the first one illustrates how problematized these ideas are. Because clearly, King's is a research-rich environment. It has researchers of global standing in their fields. It has high research output. The same will probably be true, almost certainly be true, of the universities that you work at. But what we found when we started probing it a little further was, does it follow axiomatically that having research output results in research-rich learning and teaching? So a specific activity we undertook here last year was to look at all the 9 schools and ask them, well, do they have the opportunity to have research-rich teaching? And invariably the answer comes back, well, yes, of course they do. Because if you look at our faculty, they are all research active. And all these research active people also teach. Therefore, students have a research-rich environment. Solid enough argument. But when we spoke to students, that same perspective wasn't evident. Students were not saying that they were experiencing research-rich teaching. Now, I have every faith that they were, but clearly something is going awry, even if it's only at the level of communication with students, to make them aware that this is research-rich teaching and of which they're the beneficiaries. What we'll see here is, even from that simple term about the research-rich environment, all the questions that come out of that. And this is only a summary. And where we're thinking institutionally at the moment is, do we give students the opportunities to learn and to practice as researchers learn and practice? So a researcher will identify a problem. A researcher will construct a methodology for addressing the problem. A researcher will read the relevant literature. They'll test their methodology, revise it. They'll be able to write down their methodology. They'll be able to write down their findings. Yet the day-to-day learning experience of students doesn't necessarily follow the same structure. Now, it may be the case with first-year undergraduates that it's not appropriate to immerse them completely in that. But what are we doing to scaffold and structure the learning and teaching that we provide to enable our students to be co-constructors of knowledge within this environment? So we can see, even when we look at the first term, that it leads us into a complex process of critical interrogation and re-evaluating our own practice. Here's one where we've made more headway, and it's about encouraging King's students to be globally engaged. What we did with this term was form a steering group last year with relevant stakeholders, Director of Modern Languages Centre, Head of Study Abroad and Internships. And we took a look at what we meant by global connectedness. Now, again, when we spoke to the academic schools, they were very clear on this, as saying, yes, of course we're globally connected. Our students can go and do a semester abroad. But when you start to think more deeply about that, a student going abroad can socialise with the other students of their nationality and can spend their evenings on Facebook. So it's not axiomatic that somebody going abroad is having a globally connected experience. But equally, somebody could stay in London and end up doing voluntary work with refugee support or any one of the many minority ethnic communities in London. So somebody could stay in London and have a fully globally connected experience. So we've achieved two distinct outputs from global connectedness. The first is we've anatomized what it would look like in the curriculum, and we've started to build that into our processes. So as new programs get developed, this is something they have to factor in. And you can put very practical questions in front of program teams to address this. On a simple level, you can get program teams, say, take a look at your reading list for the program you're just putting up for validation. Do the reading list for that program reflect the fact that there's a readily available body of global scholarship out there? Or is it all heavily weighted towards the output of a couple of countries? If so, would you rethink it? So we've put the emphasis there on the practical, whereas this is the large-scale themes, giving people practical advice that will enable them to put it into the curriculum. And possibly one of the most interesting things we're doing at the moment is we're setting up a King's Global Award. What this is non-academic credit-bearing, but it's to recognise students who may take on the study of an extra foreign language simply for their own development whilst they're here, or students who might do some informal work or study abroad during a summer vacation, or the student who might do voluntary work with a minority ethnic community in the UK. We're thinking in terms of 7.5 credit structure, though it's not for credits, where there'll be 25 hours of experience, 50 hours of private study and reflection. We're looking at innovative assessment methodologies. So as well as having the option of an essay or a portfolio, people could also launch a website or a blog or design a mobile app. And then if they meet our assessment criteria, they'd qualify for a King's Global Award. From the student's point of view, we think we're creating use value because this allows them to evidence that extra learning that they're doing, which gives them then an advantage when it comes to employability and postgraduate study. And in terms of specific targets, we're hoping to have the King's Global Award in place for September 2013, initially for 160 students in the first year, and we're intending to build capacity thereafter. This is one where we're a lot earlier in our thinking, and there's still a lot of contributions to come, because interdisciplinarity can take different forms. A student can simply take a module from outside their subject area, and a lot of degree programs at King's allow that. But then we started to worry, or at least consider, is that an integrated experience, or does that module somehow still stay outside all the other things they've done? So where our thinking is at the moment is we're looking for areas where there's meaningful interaction between more than one discipline, ideally problem-focused. So looking at a global problem where the evidence from one discipline alone isn't sufficient, and really seeing how we can develop proper, meaningful interdisciplinary learning opportunities rather than have one module as an adjunct to a main degree. With community engagement, we're looking at the model we've done with the Global Award and replicating it on a community level. So the idea would be then a lot of good volunteering from King's students takes place in our local communities here in London. And again, we're looking to create a recognition framework for that, to credit the excellent work that already goes on. And what we also envisage by doing so is that we raise the profile of that work, so you draw more students that way into volunteering and community activity in the first place. An awful lot of good knowledge and work is produced in King's, but to what extent do we share that with the local community, which in terms of ethnicity and wealth and so many other measurements is incredibly diverse? And if the work we can do can integrate and interleave the university with the community a little more, it'll be an excellent outcome. Here's another one where we're at the very early stages. But what we're thinking about is, what do you have to do with learning and teaching in order to enable students to become confident communicators within a disciplinary context? So by the time they leave King's, they have the autonomy to communicate within their discipline and to be self-directed in their learning thereafter. All of it is heavily dependent on student engagement. Something we've done already that I think is evidencing that we're getting good levels of student engagement. The union, the Students' Union, was running a small-scale award called the Leadership Award for people who do activity on behalf of the union, such as serving on a committee. Their problem was it had to be small-scale because the students produced a portfolio for assessment, and then they had to find people to do the assessing. And the union was relying on the goodwill of our alumni community. So what we've done is we've trained up postgraduate researchers at King's to mark the portfolios, and this has enabled expansion by 100 extra students this year. Furthermore, a structural issue at King's is that there is a large number of postgraduate researchers, and the normal academic practice opportunity of getting some teaching experience whilst you're doing your PhD is not always straightforward at King's. So we've created an academic practice opportunity as well as expanding the award, but all of this is in partnership with the union. So unless we get strong and meaningful engagement with our students, the expansion would never work. But it has, because ultimately it's student driven. We can be fairly confident that students, probably globally, are going to go into very competitive employment markets when they leave universities. By creating these awards, we're giving them evidence for the extra learning they do, which gives them an advantage when they then go into employability. It's balancing, though. The work that we're doing, some of it is in the formal curriculum, trying to contribute to program development, and some of it is co-curricular in creating awards. Now, clearly the award creation is something we can do relatively quickly by institutional standards, and we have the Leadership Award in place, and we're intending to implement the Global Award from September, hopefully the Community Award from either September or January. But when you're looking at in the curriculum, you're almost committing yourself to a much longer process. Part of it is contributing to new programs which we're doing, and there you can build in these curriculum characteristics from the outset. But with established programs, you have to wait till they come up for revalidation. So we have to accept that if you're going to try and put in place curriculum change, it's always going to be a mixture of the short-term wins you can deliver now, and then the long-term commitments that you might have to wait quite a while before you've got the tangibles. But in a way, it's the short-term wins from co-curricular that buy you that credibility in order to get the long-term change in place. Why we're doing it? Partly it's where the research took us, but we're also conscious of a very new landscape with significantly increased fees for higher education and some new words entering the HE vocabulary in the UK, perhaps most controversially the idea of student as customer. It's a problematic metaphor, and it's a reductive metaphor in my view. But by doing this work, predicated on student engagement, in partnership with students, we're giving them a different conception of higher education. They're not here as our customers, they're with us, learning like researchers, engaging with local and global communities, so that collectively and institutionally we can be co-constructors of knowledge and partnership in an arrangement which can extend well beyond the 3 years of undergraduate study. But it's not easy. Change isn't easy, full stop. And there are barriers. And we can see here, as I said, we're looking at a lengthy period of time. This could take years to percolate through fully. Some of it is student-driven, but some of the initiatives have come out of us. And hence there is a mixture of the top-up and the top-down, the bottom-up. Also, the way that individual initiatives get led. Some of it has to be quite focused, but some of it then you have to distribute out to individual teams to work on, particularly if you're working with faculty. To impose it is not to create the best working atmosphere, to work in partnership and devolve a lot of decision-making to faculty, which is going to lead to more intelligent decision-making with more support behind it. And also, King's is a large university, and it's diffuse, sites in different locations. Trying to make everyone across the university aware of these initiatives we're undertaking is challenging itself. Getting a core message, a strategic message that you can drive out to all the individual schools and all the individual faculty therein is a challenge, and one we're working on, but we haven't quite cracked it yet, but we're getting better. And finally, I think what's critical to what we're doing is trying to make everything as open and transparent as we possibly can. So to that end, we've got a core steering group at the centre of the university with a representative from all the schools, plus some of the support units such as careers and employability, plus the union, so that everything we propose doing, first of all, gets talked through. So there's no sense of this being announced on the university, but everything comes out of the university, and it is collaborative production to which we can all commit. Those are my details, and if anyone would like to pick up on the conversation at a later stage, I'll be delighted to hear from you and to help. Okay, thank you very much.